Children, do not go near that place. Come back here.
They tore down a shrine that had stood for 300 years, and by the time the sun set on that same day, 2 of the men who swung the axes were already coughing blood into their palms. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to say the words out loud. But everyone in Amaigbo knew the truth. You do not build on top of something that is still breathing. And yet, 3 months later, a brand new school stood exactly where the shrine used to be, with children's laughter echoing over ground that used to swallow sacrifices. If you're new here, welcome. And if this is your first time hearing a story like this, do me a favor and subscribe before we go any further, because where this story is headed, you will not want to miss what happens next. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because nothing about this story is as simple as it looks. The village of Amaigbo sat quietly between 2 rivers, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody's business before the person even finished doing it. At the edge of the village, past the last row of houses, past the tall iroko trees that nobody dared to cut, there was a shrine. It had no roof, only 4 crumbling walls of red earth and a floor covered in cowries, feathers, and dried blood that never seemed to fully wash away even after the heaviest rains. The elders called it Iyiocha, the shrine of the white spirit, and they said it belonged to a deity older than the village itself, a spirit that demanded silence, respect, and distance. Children were warned never to go near it. Hunters who passed close to it at night said they heard whispers that called their names, soft and familiar, like a mother calling a child home for dinner. Some listened, some didn't come back. For generations, Amaigbo lived beside this shrine in an uneasy peace. Nobody touched it, nobody prayed there except the appointed priestess, and life continued as it always had, slow and steady, the way village life does. But the world outside Amaigbo was changing fast, and the village could not stay untouched forever. That change arrived in the form of a man named Obinna Ejiofor, though everyone simply called him Chief Obi. He was not born in Amaigbo. He came from the city, dressed always in crisp white agbada, driving a jeep that struggled on the narrow bush roads, smiling a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Chief Obi had money, and in a village where the nearest good school was 2 hours away by foot, money like his could buy a lot of goodwill. He announced at a town hall meeting under the old mango tree that he wanted to build something Amaigbo had never had before, a proper primary and secondary school, complete with real classrooms, real desks, and real teachers brought in from the city. The crowd erupted into cheers. Finally, their children would not have to walk for hours just to learn their alphabets. Finally, Amaigbo would be like the towns they saw on television. But there was a problem, and Chief Obi knew it before anyone said it out loud. Because Chief Obi was not just a wealthy businessman with a heart for education. He had his own reasons, buried reasons, reasons nobody in Amaigbo would learn until it was almost too late. You see, 30 years ago, Chief Obi had actually been born in Amaigbo. His real name was not Obinna Ejiofor, at least not the way people thought. He was the grandson of a man named Nkwanko Nwafo, a hunter who had once tried to rob the shrine of a golden staff believed to hold the spirit's power, and who had vanished into the forest one night and was never seen again. His family had been chased out of Amaigbo in shame, forced to start over in the city, carrying with them a story of a stolen inheritance and a curse that followed them for 30 decades. Sickness, poverty, deaths that came too early and too strange. Chief Obi did not come back to Amaigbo to build a school out of kindness. He came back because a dying uncle on his final night on earth whispered to him that the only way to lift the curse from their bloodline was to reclaim what was taken and destroy the shrine that guarded it. Building a school on top of it was not generosity. It was a plan, a calculated, patient plan to bury the shrine so deep under concrete and cheering children that its spirit would have no way to rise again. Nobody in Amaigbo knew any of this. All they saw was a kind, rich man building them a school. The construction workers arrived on a Monday morning in the middle of the dry season. Chief Obi had hired men from outside the village, men who had never heard the stories, men who laughed when the local laborers refused to step onto the shrine grounds. Superstition, the foreman said, spitting onto the red earth. In the city, we don't fear ghosts, we fear poverty. His name was Tunde Balagun, a broad-shouldered man with a booming laugh, the kind of man who believed the world was exactly as solid and simple as it appeared. He would be the first to learn how wrong he was. Before the demolition began, Mama Ada made one final attempt. She walked to the construction site with two young men from the village, Chidi and Emeke, carrying kola nuts and a calabash of palm wine, hoping to appease the spirit before anything was touched, hoping that if destruction was truly coming, at least it would come with respect. Chief Obi allowed her to perform her rites, standing at a distance with his arms folded, that same unreadable smile. Mama Ada knelt at the center of the shrine, poured her wine onto the earth, and spoke in a language older than anyone present could understand. When she arose, her face had changed. It was pale, drawn, frightened in a way none of the villagers had ever seen her on her before. "The spirit is not sleeping," she told Chief Obi quietly. "It has been waiting. It knows your face." Chief Obi's smile finally cracked, just for a second, just long enough for Chidi to notice before it was pasted back into place. "Old woman, we are building a future here, not chasing ghosts." And with that, he gave the order. The first wall came down easily enough. Red dust rose into the air like smoke from a fire. The workers cheered. But that night, two of the men who had swung their axes hardest woke up coughing, and by morning, thin trails of blood had dried at the corners of their mouths. They were rushed to the small clinic in the next village, and the doctor there, confused, could find no illness to explain it. Within a week, both men had quietly packed their things and left, refusing to say why, refusing even to look back at the construction site as they walked away. Tunde Balagun laughed it off. Malaria, he told the remaining workers, nothing more. But even he, deep down, felt something shift in the air whenever he stood on that ground, something like being watched by eyes he could not locate.
If you're feeling that chill right now, that's good, because it means you're paying attention. And trust me, this story only gets heavier from here. Before we continue, if you haven't already, tap that subscribe button, because what happens next in Amaigbo is something you are not going to want to stumble upon halfway through. All right, let's go back. 3 months passed. Against every warning, against every strange incident, the school rose from the ashes of the shrine. It was beautiful by village standards, a long building of white painted concrete with 6 classrooms, a small office, and a courtyard where a flagpole stood exactly where the shrine's altar used to be. Chief Obi named it Amaigbo Progressive Academy, and he stood proudly at its opening ceremony, cutting a red ribbon while children in freshly sewn uniforms clapped and sang. The village, so hungry for progress, chose to forget the whispers, chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, the old stories had simply been stories after all. Mama Ada did not attend the opening. She sat alone in her hut at the edge of the village, staring at the horizon, murmuring to herself words that nobody else could hear. Her granddaughter, a sharp, curious 16-year-old girl named Ngozi, tried to comfort her. "Grandma, maybe it will be fine. Maybe the spirit has moved on." Mama Ada shook her head slowly. "Spirits like this one do not move on, child. They wait for the right moment, and then they take back what is theirs with interest." Ngozi did not fully understand what her grandmother meant, not then, but she would understand soon enough, because Ngozi herself was about to be enrolled in the very first class at Amaigbo Progressive Academy. The school year began, and for the first few weeks, everything seemed almost too perfect. Children who had never held a proper pencil were now writing their names. teachers from the city, though initially reluctant to work in such a remote place, found themselves surprisingly charmed by the eager students and the beauty of the land. Among these teachers was a young woman named Amarachuku, fresh out of teachers' college, bright-eyed, kind, assigned to teach the youngest children. Amara loved her job immediately. She loved the way the children's faces lit up when they learnt a new word, the way the whole village seemed to orbit around this new building like it was the sun. She had no idea what soil she was standing on. It started small. A little boy named Kelechi, only 7 years old, began telling his mother that a woman visited him during nap time at school, a woman with no eyes who whispered that he should come find her at the flagpole after dark. His mother dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination. Then a girl named Obi refused to walk past the school courtyard, screaming that the ground there was hungry, clutching her stomach as if herself she felt it trying to swallow her. The teachers laughed nervously among themselves, blaming it on children hearing too many village folk tales from their grandparents. But then, Tunde Balogun, the same foreman who had scoffed at superstition, returned to the site one evening to collect leftover construction tools, and he never returned home. His wife searched for him for 3 days before his body was found floating in the river that bordered the village, though strangely, his lungs held no water at all. The doctor who examined him said with a shaking voice that it looked as though someone had simply stopped breathing, as if something had reached inside his chest and pulled the breath straight out of him. The village began to whisper again, old fears reawakening beneath new fears. But Chief Obi, upon hearing the news, did something strange. He did not look surprised. He did not look afraid. If anything, those closest to him swore they saw something like relief pass over his face, quickly hidden behind practiced concern. This detail did not go unnoticed by one person in particular, Ngozi, Mama Ada's sharp granddaughter, who had inherited more of her grandmother's perception than neither of them realized. Ngozi began to watch Chief Obi closely, the way he lingered near the flagpole after school hours when he thought no one was watching, the way he sometimes spoke to the empty courtyard in low tones, as if negotiating with someone unseen. One evening, hiding behind a cluster of banana trees, Ngozi overheard something that turned her blood to ice. Chief Obi was standing at the flagpole and he was saying, "I brought them back to you. Children, teachers, workers, all of them standing right on top of you every single day. Is that not enough? I want what my grandfather took. Give me the staff and I will give you the rest." Ngozi did not understand the details, but she understood enough. Chief Obi had not built this school out of love for Amaigbo. He had built it as bet. This is the moment where everything the audience thought they understood about this story completely flips. So if you've made it this far, you already know this is worth staying till the very end for. But we're only getting started because the deepest secret hasn't even been revealed yet. Ngozi rushed home that night and told her grandmother everything she had heard. Mama Ada listened in silence, her old hands trembling slightly, and when Ngozi finished, the old woman finally spoke the truth she had been hiding for 30 years, a truth even Ngozi's mother had never been told. Obina Ejiofor, Mama Ada said, slowly, is not who this village believes him to be. His true name is Obiora, grandson of Okonkwo Nafo, the hunter who tried to steal the golden staff of Iyocha 30 years ago. Ngozi's mouth fell open. Everyone in Amaigbo knew the old story of the thief who vanished into the forest, but nobody had ever known what became of his family. The spirit did not kill Okonkwo that night. It cursed his bloodline instead, condemning them to suffering until the staff was returned or until the family itself paid a price equal to what was stolen. Obiora has come back not to build, but to bargain. He believes if enough people stand on this cursed ground, if enough lives orbit around it daily, he can convince the spirit to trade the lives of strangers for the freedom of his own family. Ngozi felt sick. "The children," she whispered. "He's using the children as an offering." Mama Ada nodded grimly. "Not directly. He is too clever, too careful for that. But if the spirit grows hungry enough, and if he does not find another way to satisfy it, he may not have a choice in who it takes. The tension in the village grew heavier by the day. More strange things happened. Chalk that wrote on its own on the blackboard when no one touched it. A well near the school that turned foul overnight. Children waking from naps unable to remember minutes at a time, as though something had briefly borrowed their bodies. Parents began pulling their kids from the school in fear, but Chief Obi, ever the smooth talker, held emergency meetings, promising compensation, promising investigations, promising that everything was under control. Behind his calm exterior, however, he was unraveling. He had expected the spirits to negotiate by now. Instead, it seemed to be growing bolder, hungrier, angrier that he had not yet returned what was owed. And here is where the story takes its cruelest turn, the twist that changes everything you thought you understood about who the real villain is. Because Chief Obi did not actually know where the golden staff was. His grandfather had died before revealing its location, taking the secret into whatever darkness swallowed him 30 years ago. Chief Obi had gambled everything, his fortune, his family's future, an entire village's safety, on the hope that building the school would somehow force the spirit's hand, force it to reveal what he needed to know. He was not a mastermind with a plan. He was a desperate, frightened man, improvising with other people's lives as his currency. And now that improvisation was spiraling completely out of his control. Amara, the young teacher, became the next to feel the shrine's wrath directly. One quiet afternoon, marking exercise books alone in her classroom after the children had gone home, she heard humming, faint and mournful, coming from beneath the floorboards themselves. She told herself it was the wind. Then she felt the temperature in the room drop so suddenly her breath turned visible, and a voice, clear as if someone stood directly behind her, whispered a single word: return. She fled the classroom, refusing to teach another day without protection. When she reported this to Chief Obi, desperate for answers, he finally, for the first time, showed cracks in his composure, his hands shaking as he poured himself a drink, and admitted, quietly, that he did not know how to stop what he had started. It was Ngozi who finally proposed a solution, a plan so bold it terrified even her grandmother. If the spirit wanted the golden staff, and if nobody alive knew where it truly was, then perhaps the answer lay not in searching further, but in going directly to where Okonko had vanished 30 years ago, deep into the forbidden part of the forest beyond the river, a place even hunters avoided, where the old stories said the spirit itself resided when it was not haunting its shrine. Mama Ada objected fiercely at first. "You are 16, child. That forest has swallowed grown men." But Ngozi, stubborn and clear-eyed, just like her grandmother had been at her age, argued that someone had to act before the spirit grew tired of waiting and took its payment by force from anyone it chose, guilty or innocent. Eventually, faced with no better option, Mama Ada agreed to guide her. Word reached Chief Obi of Ngozi's plan, and in one final desperate act, he insisted on joining them, not out of bravery, but because he understood that if the truth was uncovered without him present, the village would learn everything, his real identity, his real motives, the danger he knowingly brought upon them all. He needed to control the outcome, or at least control what people would believe about him afterward. The three of them, Mama Ada, Ngozi, and Chief Obi, set out at dusk, crossing the river by canoe, entering a forest so dense that sunlight barely touched the ground even at midday. The air grew colder with every step, and the humming Amara had described in her classroom seemed to follow them now, growing louder, closer, weaving between the trees like something alive and curious. Ngozi gripped a small lantern, her heart hammering, while Mama Ada led the way with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life preparing, without knowing it, for this exact night. They found the clearing near midnight. In its center stood an ancient tree, wider than any of them could wrap their arms around, its bark carved with symbols that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves when looked at directly. And at the base of that ancient tree, half buried beneath 30 years of fallen leaves and creeping roots, lay the golden staff, exactly where Okonkwo Nwafor had dropped it the night the forest took him. Chief Obi lunged for it immediately, and this is where his true character, hidden for the entire story, finally revealed itself completely. He did not intend to return it to the shrine at all. Standing there, staff in trembling hands, he confessed the final piece of the truth, the piece even Mama Ada had not anticipated. His plan had never truly been to lift the curse through humble return. He had convinced himself in his growing desperation that if he took the staff and fled the village entirely, disappearing the way his grandfather once had, the curse might simply lose track of him, might exhaust itself hunting a family that no longer existed in any fixed place. He intended to abandon Amaigbo, abandon the school, abandon the children and teachers he had lured onto cursed ground, leaving them to face whatever consequences remained while he vanished with the one object powerful enough to have bought his freedom all along. Ngozi could not believe what she was hearing. "You would leave an entire village to suffer for your own escape?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the ancient trees. Chief Obi's face, illuminated by lantern light, looked almost pitiful in that moment. A man so consumed by inherited fear that he had become willing to sacrifice anyone to escape it. But wanting something for yourself does not excuse what you are willing to destroy to get it. And Mama Ada, sensing the spirit's presence thickening around them like fog rolling in from all directions, understood that the moment of true reckoning had finally arrived. The humming stopped. Silence fell so complete that even the insects of the forest seemed to hold their breath. And then, from the darkness surrounding the ancient tree, a shape began to form, pale and tall, featureless where fifths should be, exactly as young Kelechi had described the woman who visited him during nap time. The spirit of Iyiocha had finally chosen to show itself.
It did not speak in words at first, only in feeling, a wave of grief and fury so overwhelming that all three of them fell to their knees. Mama Ada, gathering every ounce of her 40 years of service, rose first, speaking rapidly in the old language, pleading for a chance to make things right before judgment was passed. The spirit's attention turned toward Chief Obi, and in that moment, Ngozi understood something crucial that changed the entire shape of the story once more. The spirit had never wanted revenge against an entire bloodline out of cruelty. It had cursed Okonkwo's family 30 years ago because the staff was not merely gold. It was a vessel containing the spirit's own bound essence, stolen in an act that had left the spirit itself weakened, trapped partially outside its shrine, unable to fully rest for 30 decades. The curse on Chief Obi's family had never been punishment for punishment's sake. It had been the spirit's desperate, painful attempt to draw the staff back to itself by any means necessary, the same way a wounded animal thrashes toward anything that might ease its pain. This realization changed everything Ngozi thought she understood. The spirit was not simply a monster to be feared or a villain to be defeated. It was a victim too, robbed and wounded, reacting the only way something ancient and formless knew how to react to theft and abandonment. And Chief Obi, standing there clutching the very thing that could end 30 years of suffering on both sides, held the power to either heal this wound or deepen it into something far worse. For a long, agonizing moment, nobody moved. Chief Obi looked down at the staff in his hands, gold catching what little moonlight filtered through the canopy above. Ngozi watched his face, watched the war playing out behind his eyes between decades of inherited fear and the small, flickering possibility of finally doing the right thing. And then, slowly, shakily, he extended his arms toward the pale figure before him. "Take it back," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Take it back and let my family rest. Let this village rest." The spirit reached out, and where its hand met the staff, a light so bright it seemed to swallow the entire clearing burst outward, forcing all three humans to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the spirit was gone, the staff was gone, and the ancient tree itself seemed to exhale, its carved symbols finally settling into stillness after 30 years of restless shifting. They returned to Amaigbo just as dawn broke over the two rivers, exhausted, changed, carrying a secret that would need careful handling. In the days that followed, strange occurrences at the school stopped entirely. Chalk stayed still on the blackboard. The well returned to clean, sweet water.
children stopped speaking of eyeless women visiting them during naps. Amara returned to her classroom with color back in her cheeks, teaching without the weight of unseen eyes upon her. But if you think this story ends simply with everyone living happily ever after, stay with me, because the ending still holds one more turn you won't see coming. And honestly, this is exactly why stories like this deserve to be shared. So if you haven't hit subscribe yet, now would be the perfect moment, because the way this village chose to remember what happened says more about human nature than almost anything else in this tale. Chief Obi did not stay in Amaigbo. Ashamed of everything his desperation had nearly cost an entire community, and unable to face the families he knowingly endangered, quietly signed the school over completely to the village council, funded its operations for the next 10 years from his own remaining wealth, and left in the middle of the night, much the way his grandfather once had, though this time by choice, seeking some kind of peace far from the ground that had nearly consumed him. Some villagers wanted to hate him forever. Others, upon learning the full truth from Mama Ada, who eventually decided the village deserved to know, found themselves feeling something closer to pity than anger, understanding that a man raised inside 30 years of inherited curse and fear rarely grows into someone capable of clear, selfless choices, at least not without cost, not without nearly losing everything first. The school remained, renamed by the village council simply as Amaigbo Community School, stripped of Chief Obi's name entirely. Mama Ada continued to watch over the land, though now with a lightness in her steps that Ngozi had never seen before. The burden of 30 years of unspoken dread finally lifted from her shoulders. And Ngozi herself, the sharp, curious girl who once simply attended classes in a building she didn't fully understand, became something of a legend among the younger children, the girl who walked into the forbidden forest and returned to tell the tale. Years later, when Ngozi herself became old enough to consider taking up her grandmother's role as priestess, she would tell this very story to new generations of children, sitting cross-legged before her, warning them not that spirits were monsters to be feared blindly, but that respect, honesty, and the courage to make things right, even very late, even after everything seems already lost, mattered more than any curse, any fear, any desperate shortcut a person might be tempted to take. The school stands today at the edge of Amaigbo, children's laughter still rising over ground that once demanded silence. But now, instead of swallowing sacrifices, it grows something far more powerful: knowledge, hope, and a community that finally learned, the hardest way possible, that some debts can only be settled with truth. If this story moved you, if it kept you guessing right up until the last twist, then you already know exactly what to do. Subscribe now, because stories like this one, stories that remind us how thin the line really is between the world we can see and the one we can't, deserve to be passed down, shared, and remembered, just like Amaigbo remembers theirs. Until the next story finds you, take care of yourselves, and never forget, some ground remembers everything.